Of old was the age when Ymir lived. Sea nor cool waves nor sand there were. Earth had not been, nor heaven above, but a yawning gap, and grass nowhere. Then Bur's sons lifted the level land. Mythgarth the mighty there they made. The sun from the south warmed the stones of earth, and green was the ground with growing leeks. The sun, the sister of the moon, from the south, her right hand cast over heaven's rim. No knowledge she had where her home should be. The moon knew not what might was his. The stars knew not where their stations were. Then sought the gods their assembly seats, the holy ones, and council held. Names then gave they to noon and twilight. Morning they named, and the waning moon. Night and evening, the years to number. At Ithafal met the mighty gods. Shrines and temples they timbered high. Forges they set, and they smithied ore. Tongs were wrought, and tools they fashioned. In their dwellings at peace they played at tables. Of gold no lack did the gods then know. Till Thyther came up, giant maids 3, huge of might, out of Jotunheim. Then sought the gods their assembly seats, the holy ones, and council held, to find who should raise the race of dwarfs out of Brimir's blood in the legs of Blaine. There was Mutsugnir, the mightiest maid of all the dwarfs, and Durin next. Many a likeness of men they made, the dwarfs in the earth, as Durin said. Ni and Nethi, Northri and Suthri, Austri and Vestri, Althiof, Fallen, Nar and Nain, Neeping, Dane, Beaver, Bover, Bomber, Nori, An and Onor, I, Mjothvidnir, Vig and Gandalf, Vindolf, Thrain, Thek and Thorin, Thror, Vit and Lit, Nir and Nyrath. Now have I told Regan and Rosvis the list aright. Fili, Kili, Fundi, Nalli, Hepthefili, Hanar, Sphere, Fror, Hornbordi, Frigg and Loni, Ardvong, Yardi, Eikenskidjaldi, the race of the dwarfs, in Valin's throng, down to Lofar. The list must I tell, the rocks they left and through wetlands. They sought a home in the fields of sand. There were Thraupnir and Dalxarsir, Hord, Haugspjordi, Leving, Gloin, Duri, Ordi, Doof, Undvardi, Skirfir, Virfir, Skafith Ulf and Ingvi, Eikenskjaldi, Fjallar and Njord. So for all time shall the tale be known, the list of all the forebears of Lofar. Then from the throng did three come forth, from the home of the gods, the mighty and gracious. Two without fate on the land they found, Ask and Embla, empty of night. Soul they had not, sense they had not, heat nor motion, nor goodly hue. Soul gave Odin, sense gave Vanir, heat gave Lothar, and goodly hue. And ash I know, Yggdrasil its name, with water white is the great tree wet. Then skim the dews that fall in the dales, green by earth's well does it ever grow. Thence come the maidens mighty in wisdom, three from the dwelling down neath the tree. Earth is one named, Vinthandi the next. On the wood they scored, and scold the third. Laws they made there, and life allotted to the sons of men, and set their fates. That is part of the creation myth of Norse mythology, and that is what today's video is about. I previously have done videos on the Greek and Egyptian pantheon. I've been meaning to do this for a long time, but this ended up taking more time and research than either of those last two videos. I have three primary sources I'll be using for this video. The first is the Poetic Edda, the mythological poems of Norse mythology. This particular version is the translation from Henry Adams Bellows, which I personally like a little bit better than the other translation, and you can see I have some bookmarks there. I also used the prose Eddas, tales from Norse mythology, instead of poems. These are more like stories. And then I also used Essential Asa through Walking the Path of Norse Paganism by Diana L. Paxson. So those are my three primary sources, and then of course I used Wikipedia and Google as well. Now going back to that creation story, you might have heard some names you recognize if you're a fan of fantasy literature. It is no secret that J.R.R. Tolkien took a lot of inspiration from Norse mythology when he made Lord of the Rings. I mean, just here you have Durin, one of the dwarves. Also the name of a dwarf in Lord of the Rings, Durin's Bane, right? That is the name. Durin is one of the dwarves. You have Nori. You have, I believe, Dane was one of the dwarves in Lord of the Rings. Of course, right there, Gandalf. Gandalf is one of the dwarves in Norse mythology. Thorin, Fili, and Kili. Like, you know, you just look there and you're like, wow, he just straight stole some of those names. So I'll be referring back to that and the prose at different points. But you also saw in that creation myth Odin breathing some life into the first two humans. If you got that, two without fate on the land they found, Ask and Embla. Ask and Embla. Ask is the first man. Embla is the first woman. Othin, which is Odin, gave them their soul. Honir gave them senses, and Lothar gave them heat. But in this instance, that probably means blood. But anyway, Anyways, let's jump into it now. So we have Norse Gods, a presentation by yours truly, Daftering Cloud ASMR. There's a nice little image there. So, let's talk about the classification of deity in Norse mythology. The first and main classification, the classification that most of the gods you've heard of belong to, is the Aesir. Aesir literally translates to gods, but these are gods that are often associated with war and chaos. Then we have the Vanir. These are gods associated with fertility, wisdom, and nature. They are the namesake of Vanheimer, and they are attested to in the Poetic Eddas. These are the two main classifications of the gods, and the Aesir and the Vanir go to war against one another. And at some point towards the late Viking Age, the mythology shifts to a point where the Vanir are basically Aesir. Like they're basically the same thing at that point. But then you also have the Jotun or the Jotnar, which they're falsely referred to as giants, but I don't necessarily like the term giants or the Jotun. Some of them definitely were giants, but they are contrasted as another non-human being separate from gods, elves, and dwarves, which, yes, elves as well as dwarves are present in Norse mythology. They are poised as the other and pose a threat to both humans and gods. But the Jotun and Jotnar are actually the first beings of creation. They're primordial beings that existed before the Aesir or the Vanir. Although they're usually seen, not always, but often seen as weaker than the Aesir or Vanir, the Jotun weren't really worshipped or venerated in the same way the Aesir or the Vanir were. I don't want to say demons is the proper, like maybe modern allegory, but think of it as a demon or a dark entity or force in opposition to both your gods and you as a human being in a modern context. So first we want to talk about the Aesir. It is derived from the Proto-Germanic word. There's two words here that is hypothesized to be the root of Aesir. The first one means either pole, beam, or rafter, and the second word means either life or vitality. The Aesir are thought to hold the cosmos together and prevent the Jotun from dragging it back into formless chaos. The Aesir live in Asgard, which is located in the highest branch of the world tree Yggdrasil. And Odin is the chief deity of the Aesir. This is a list of the Aesir. This is not at all extensive, but there was a lot of gods, obviously, with the Norse tradition being very oral as a tradition. Some of them have been lost to time, but this is a non-exhaustive list of Aesir. These are the more popular ones you've probably heard of: Odin, Thor, Frigg, Tyr, Loki, Balder, Heimdall, Idun, and Bragi. So let's just start with the big man himself there. We'll start with Odin. There's a nice depiction of Odin sitting on his throne. He has his spear, he has his ravens, his wolves, his crown, a very large beard. And again, we're seeing the sort of iconography of a chief deity of a pantheon from Proto-Indo-European religions and how it evolved. You have Zeus, you have Odin. You can look into some of the Semitic religions. El fits the bill here before Yahweh adopted his sort of a station. Odin is the god of wisdom, knowledge, air, poetry, death, healing, royalty, divination, gallows, frenzy, magic, and runes. So a lot of things As they're under Odin, it pays to be the Allfather. But something to note here is Odin's association with magic. And this has always been a very interesting thing. Some scholars talk about this. Maybe the reason why is sort of debated. But in Viking Age society, in the society and cultures of the people that would be practicing this religion, magic was seen as a very feminine thing. Your main practicers of magic were the Volfa, which were these female shaman witches that would go from place to place. They were kind of like wandering hermits in a way, practicing divination and doing things like that, like spell work, and magic was seen as very feminine. Men would be ostracized if they tried to practice any sort of witchcraft or divination. But then Odin, who is the chief of this pantheon, is the god of magic, and he's commonly depicted as seeking out wisdom, occult magical knowledge, which was not seen as a masculine trait. So a very interesting thing there with Odin. Odin had many, many titles. If you've seen American Gods, I have as many names as there are winds. Allfather, At-Rider, Flaming Eye, Lord of the Undead, the Ever-Booming, Wand-Bearer. Some dope names there. Odin is the son of the Jotun Bestla and Bor. He is the father of Thor and Balder. Odin wields the spear Gungnir, which never misses its target. He has two pet wolves, Giri and Freki, which are his familiars. Again, the idea of a familiar is very female-coded, especially in this culture. Odin also has two ravens, Hugin and Munin, who watch Midgard for him. Midgard being the earth that human beings inhabit. He also rides Sleipnir, the 8-legged flying horse. Odin is a constant seeker of knowledge. He drank the mead of poetry, which grants all knowledge, sort of like the apple of the tree of knowledge, right? He helped create the world through the slaying of Ymir, the ancestor of all Jotun. And Odin helped create the first two humans, Ask and Embla, which I already talked about. Odin is associated with the Valkyries and is the overseer of Valhalla. Valhalla, which is the hall that the warriors who died a glorious death go to until they are resurrected at Ragnarok to fight for the Aesir. Odin has more than 170 names, all associated with his various aspects, the most of any Germanic god. Wednesday is derived from the Old English Wodnesdag, or Day of Woden, Woden being the Anglo-Saxon pronunciation of Odin, so Wednesday is Odin's Day, and his equivalents in other pantheons, Zeus, Mercury, Brahma, Amun from the Egyptian pantheon, and Ahura Mazda from Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism is an ancient Persian religion coming out of modern-day Iran, which had a lot of influence on early Israelite Jewish polytheism back when Judaism and that area, was a polytheist religion instead of a monotheist religion. But Ahura Mazda is part of Zoroastrianism. Next we get to Thor, one of the most well-known because of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And here's an absolutely fantastic painting of Thor holding Mjolnir with lightning coming down behind him. Thor is the god of lightning, thunder, storms, sacred groves and trees, strength, protection, destruction of humanity, hollowing and fertility. Hollowing in this instance just meaning like making a place or thing sacred. Because in addition to Mjolnir being a very powerful weapon, it also had the power to bless things. And then fertility, which is very interesting for a male god. Usually that belongs to goddesses. Some of Thor's titles are the Terrible, the Bear, Fierce Soul, and Thunder Hurler. Thor is the son of Odin and Njord, husband of Sif, lover of the Jotun Jornsaksa, with whom he fathered Magni. Thor is the wielder of Mjolnir, of course, most people know that. But he is also the wearer of the belt making Njord, which doubles his strength. I think that literally translates to belt of strength. And the gloves Jarngriper, which allow him to handle Mjolnir, which I believe translates to iron grippers. Thor rides in a chariot pulled by two goats, Dangrisnir and Dangnjoster, whom he eats and resurrects every day. And Thor's role in the mythology: he slays the world serpent Jormungandr during Ragnarok, but dies shortly thereafter, ushering in the death and then rebirth of the world. And I have a couple passages here. I'm back, so we'll start with the prose Edda. That was really weird. I just wanted to start to scream outside. We'll start with the prose Edda. So, in the prose Edda, we have this passage. Thor is the foremost of them. He that is called Thor of the Aesir, or Okuthor. He is strongest of all the gods and men. He has his realm in the place called Thrudvangar, and his hall is called Bilskirnir. In that hall are 500 rooms and 40. That is the greatest house that men know of. It is thus said in Grimnismal: 500 floors and more than 40. So reckon I, Bilskirnir, with bending ways of those houses that I know of hall-roofed. My sons I know the most. Thor has 2 he-goats that are called Tooth Gnasher and Tooth Gritter, and a chariot wherein he drives. And the he-goats draw the chariot, therefore is he called Okuthor. He has also 3 rings, 3 things of great price. One is the hammer Mjolnir, which the Rime giants and the hill giants know, when it is raised on high, and that is no wonder. It has bruised many a skull among their fathers or their kinsmen. He has a second costly thing, best of all, the girdle of might. And when he clasps it about him, then the godlike strength within him is increased by half. Yet a third thing he has, in which there is much virtue, his iron gloves. He cannot do without them when he uses his hammer shaft. But no one is so wise that he can tell all his mighty works. Yet I can tell thee so much tidings of him, that the hours would be spent before all that I know were told. So that's the prose Edda. Now we go to the poetic Edda. I found some passages in here. Come back to that one later. Okay, here we have the death of Thor during Ragnarok at the hands of Jormungandr. Hither there comes the son of Lothin, which is Odin, the bright. Actually, we'll go up one passage. Then comes Sigfather's mighty son Vithar to fight with the foaming wolf. In the giant's son does he thrust his sword. Full to the heart, his father is avenged. Hither there comes the son of Lothin. The bright snake gapes to heaven above. And then there's a passage that is missing. We've lost that passage to time, unfortunately. But it continues. Against the serpent goes Othin's son. In anger smites the warder of earth. Forth from their homes must all men flee. 9 paces fares the son of Fjordgen, slain by the serpent. Fearless he sinks. So, kills the serpent, but he goes out as well. Back to the presentation. The day, Thursday, bears his name, and he is one of the most popular and persistent gods of the Norse pantheon. Thursday, Thor's day, pretty straightforward. His equivalents in other mythologies: Zeus, Hercules, interesting enough, Jupiter, Amun, Hadad, Hermasta again, Taranis, Uranus, Set. Now we come to Frigg, and there she is. With a lot of the iconography she's really known for here. She has her drop spindle, weaving, some thread. There's some babies, there's a stork. This is all very iconographical of her. She's the goddess of fertility, motherhood, marriage, and prophecy. Some of Frigg's titles are the Queen of Asgard and Goddess of Domestic Arts. But unfortunately, a lot of records of her are kind of lost to time. We know that she was very popular and a very important goddess to people who believed in this religion, but just a lot of, we don't have a lot of historical records of her, so a lot of her titles and things like that have been lost. Frigg was the wife of Odin and the mother to Balder, and she dwells in the wetland halls of Fensalir. The day, Friday, bears Frigg's name, and as I mentioned earlier, this term Frigg is depicted as a Volfa, which is a practitioner of Norse magic and shamanism, known as Sadir. So there was 2 types of magic in this tradition. One of those types was Sadir, which is practiced by the Volfas. There's an association with Freya. It is disputed and controversial, but both seemingly evolved from the pre-Germanic goddess Frigga. By the late Viking Age, the 2 were only nominally distinct, if not practically the same. And we have some equivalents of Frigg in Isis, Hera, Demeter, Aphrodite, and Athena. Now we come to Loki, the trickster god. I'm not sure where this image comes from, but it's very, very funny looking. Looks like an old English manuscript. Loki is the god of mischief, trickery, and deception. Some of his titles are Roarer, Father of Lies, the Sly God, and Sky Traveler. At times, Loki is depicted as working both with and against the gods. He is the father of Hel, the wolf Fenrir, and the serpent Jormungandr. So, Loki is the father of 2 of the creatures mainly responsible for Ragnarok. Loki, taking the form of a mare, was impregnated by a stallion and birthed Sleipnir, whom is Odin's horse that he rides as a legged horse that flies. Loki is a shapeshifter who takes the form of a salmon, a mare, a fly, and an elderly woman. Loki orchestrated the death of the god Balder, for which Odin binds him with the entrails of his son. At the onset of Ragnarok, Loki escapes his shackles and fights against the Aesir. He and Heimdall slay each other. His equivalents in some other pantheons: Anansi, Hermes, Maui in the Hawaiian pantheon, Coyote, which is a Navajo trickster god, and Sun Wukong from Chinese mythology. Now we come to Balder, the Shining One. There's a depiction of Balder there. Well, there's actually a lot going on here. Pay particular attention in the front there. You see sort of a crone-looking figure handing an arrow to a man with his hands and his eyes closed. That is actually Loki in disguise, and we'll come back to that. Balder is the god of light, wisdom, courage, and beauty. Some of Balder's titles are Prince, Lord, White, Shining One, and White One. Balder is the son of Odin and Frigg. He is the brother of Thor. Following a dream of his death, Frigg made every object on earth vow to never hurt Balder. All objects made this vow save for the mistletoe, who was so unimportant she thought not to ask. Loki made a magical spear from mistletoe, and during an event where the gods were hurling objects at Balder, which bounced off him without harm, he handed the spear to Balder's brother Hodr, who killed him with it. So going back to that picture, in the foreground there, it looks like an arrow here, but in myth it was a spear. That's Loki in disguise handing Hodr the mistletoe. Now, let's go back to the Eddas. We're gonna go back to the Prose Edda. Okay. The second son of Odin is Balder, and good things are to be said of him. He is best, and all praise him. He is so fair of feature and so bright that light shines from him. A certain herb is so white that it is likened to Balder's brow. Of all grasses it is whitest, and by it thou mayest judge his fairness, both in hair and in body. He is the wisest of the Aesir, and the fairest spoken and most gracious, and that quality attends him, that none may gainsay his judgments. He dwells in the place called Breidablik, which is in heaven. In that place may nothing unclean be, even as is said here. Breidablik is called where Balder has a hall made for himself, in that land where I know lie fewest painful runes. Balder, pretty big deal there, the wisest of all Aesir and the most fair, wiser even than Odin. We have some more Balder here. I think this is his death, yes. Yes. I saw for Balder the bleeding god, the son of Othin, his destiny set, famous and fair in the lofty fields. Full grown in strength, the mistletoe stood. His hands he washed not, his hair he combed not, till he bore to the bale blaze Baldur's foe. But in Fensalir did Frigg weep sore for Valhall's need. Would you know yet more? One did I see in the wet woods bound, a lover of ill, and to Loki like. By his side does Sigyn sit, nor is glad to see her mate. Would you know yet more? I think I read a little bit more than I needed to there. But basically, that's Baldur. Back to the presentation. Baldur's death was the start of the chain of events which led to Ragnarok. Now here's the interesting part, and stop me if this sounds a little bit familiar. After the rebirth of the world, after Ragnarok, Baldur will be reborn, the only god to do so. So Ragnarok happens, the gods are fighting the Jotun. The gods die, the world is plunged into darkness and chaos. But then the world is reborn out of that chaos, brand new. But only one God comes back with the world. And that God who is resurrected is Baldur, the Shining One, who is the most fair and wise. Stop me if that sounds familiar. Baldur's equivalents in other pantheons: Apollo, Belobog, and Achilles. Now we're moving on to the Vanir. Obviously, it didn't go over every single Aesir, but we would have been here all day. The Vanir, after the Aesir Vanir War, they become a subgroup of the Aesir, and they are linked to ship burial customs among Germanic peoples. Here's a non-extensive list of the Vanir. We have Freya, Freyr, Gerdur, Golvik, Kvasir, Lidir, Njord, Skadi. We're going to talk about Njord, also referred to as Njordur. There's a nice illustration of him with, I believe, Skadi up on the snowy mountain looking down at the sea mournfully. Njord is the god of the sea, seafaring, wind, fishing, wealth, crop fertility. Njord is the father of Frey and Freya. He's the husband of Skadi. Njord was one of the most popular gods of the Viking Age, especially among seafarers, which makes sense because they made their living out at sea. Originally a Vanir, Njord is gifted to the Aesir as a peace offering. And some of his equivalents in other pantheons are Poseidon, Saturn, and Kronos. Now back to the Poetic Edda. These are actually the last two passages I have to read, so we have Njord. Let's see. So this is Odin having a conversation with a Volfa. Odin's in disguise, but that is the way this poem plays out. So Odin spoke. 10th, answer me now, if thou knowest all the fate that is fixed for the gods. Whence came up Njord to the kin of the gods? Rich in temples and shrines he rules, though of gods he was never begot. And then the Volfa he's speaking to Vafthrûdnir speaks. In the home of the Wains did the wise one create him, and gave him as pledge to the gods. At the fall of the world shall he fare once more home to the Wains, so wise. Basically saying, once you guys die, he's going back to the Vanir. Now we have a conversation between Loki and Njord, where they're kind of going back and forth. So Njord speaks. Small ill does it work, though woman may have a lord or lover or both, but a wonder it is that this womanish god comes hither, though babes he was born. And then Loki speaks, Be silent, Njord, thou wast eastward sent to the gods as a hostage given, and the daughters of Ymir their privy had, when used they make of thy mouth. Njord spoke, Great was my gain, though long was I gone, to the gods as a hostage given. The son did I have whom no man hates, and foremost of gods is found. Loki spoke, Give heed now, Njord, nor boast too high, no longer I hold it hid. With thy sister hadst thou so fair a son, thus hadst thou no worse a hope. So twice there we have them saying, both Loki and Njord saying straight up that he was a hostage that was given to the gods and became a god himself, as after being released as a hostage. Now we come to Skadi. Skadi, there she is on her skis. She is the goddess of bow hunting, skiing, winter, and mountains. Skadi is the wife of Njord and later the wife of Odin. It's kind of speculated that Njord got tired of living up in the mountains and wanted to go back down to the ocean, so he just kind of left. Skadi's name is thought to have perhaps derived from the same root word as Scandinavia, and she lives in the highest reaches of the mountains where snow never melts. Now we come to the Jotun or Jotnar. They are the first beings of creation, and they are instrumental in Ragnarok. They are the sworn enemies of the Aesir and the Vanir. However, sometimes there are love affairs, and several gods are half Jotun. Without them, there would be no gods. The Jotnar live in Jotunheim, which is located ambiguously to the north, just kind of, no matter where you are, they're just to the north. Jotunheim is separated by barriers that cannot be traversed by humans nor gods. And there are more Jotnar than any other deities in Norse mythology. These are just some of the more well-known ones. Ymir, Surtur, Gerdur, Aegir, Angerboda, Mimir, Hrungnir, Bullthorn. Now here's some religious practices of Norse mythology. In the Norse religion, the primary religious ritual was the blot, which is the animal sacrifice. Another interesting practice was the deposition of artifacts into wetlands, such as weapons, shields, tools, and jewelry. Now we don't know if they only deposited things into wetlands, or if only those artifacts have survived because they were preserved by the wetlands, so we're not too sure. And then you have two types of magic, which I alluded to earlier. There's the Galdir, which is spells and incantations with rites. Think of like ritual magic, witchcraft, things like that. And then Sadir, which is magic of divination and shaping the future. Because I kind of believed everybody had fates and threads of fate, and Vufas practicing Sadir would determine your future and try to change it, things like that. And in closing, Norse religion can be traced back to about 500 BC, as Christianity gripped Scandinavia in the 8th century CE. Its followers dwindled. Although there's some really interesting pieces you can see as Christianity started to come in. Since they were a polytheistic society, they kind of just started to blend Christianity with their Norse practices. And there's actually, I can't remember the name of it right now, but there's some manuscripts with spells and magical rituals from this time period, and there's there's a ritual that was found where not only are they calling upon the power of Odin and Thor in their spellcasting, they're also petitioning Jesus Christ and the Virgin Mary to help them in their spell work, which is just so interesting to see. Heathenry, Norse paganism, or Germanic neo-paganism is a modern reconstruction of these beliefs. Another term is asatru, although that nowadays has some negative connotations. This started to emerge in the 19th and 20th centuries and is somewhat common in Europe, North America, and Australasia, with more than 20,000 reported followers of the religion. So, there we go, Norse mythology, long awaited. I know I should have done this months ago, but I wanted to make sure I got it right. I'm definitely not an expert, but I tried my best to use as many different sources as I could to hopefully provide a decent overview here. Again, this is just surface level stuff for the most part. If this interests you, there's a lot more you can dig into, but I do hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more content just like this almost every single day. Until next time, guys.